Most students in public schools read the book Red Badge of Courage. Some of you may have even seen the movie, and one of the more recent movies had John Boyd as the lead person, a Civil War soldier who is wounded, and the badge of courage is blood, but it's a red badge of courage. And throughout the book, he goes through seeing other people who are shot, and he develops some sense of courage in the face of difficulties. Today, I want to talk to you about the Apostle Paul having some street cred, about him having growth through persecution, growth through difficulties. This is a picture by, does anybody know which famous painter offered up this version of Paul? Rembrandt. This is a Rembrandt, right? And this is his version of Paul sitting in prison. And prisons in the Roman Empire are not quite like the surroundings that Rembrandt imagined. They were often a hole in the ground, deep enough so you couldn't get out. Often they wouldn't provide you with food or clothing. You were dependent on someone who was a friend of yours or a family member to come and help you to continue to live. Some people have painted a rosy picture of Paul's time in prison, but it certainly was not. Matter of fact, he mentions the word chains 3 times in our passage today. You can imagine Paul's life. At least 4 of the letters that we have in the New Testament were written when he was in jail. And the book of Philippians has been called the letter of joy. That's a radical thing. To say a letter written from prison is a letter of joy. But we can think about Dietrich Bonhoeffer during World War II in Germany. We can think about Martin Luther King Jr., who wrote his most famous letter from jail. Dorothy Day, Daniel Berrigan, Nelson Mandela. They all had a powerful influence from prison. They had street cred. They had a red badge of courage. Paul's joy comes from the fact that he knows that he's not alone. He's a part of a movement. He's connected. These people who are coming to him, they give him food, they give him things. He's writing in thankfulness to the people who have helped him out while he's in prison. And Paul's joy came from his connection to a movement that was larger than himself. Where do we look for joy in the world today? Do we look for someone who's in prison and say, what's the secret to joy? What a radical statement this is, to look at Paul in prison and say, this is the guy who really knew what joy was. So what can Paul teach us about joy from prison? He says, to live is Christ, to die is gain. He had a purpose, and he had a reason for living. This is a 2005 painting of Paul. Notice how our thoughts have changed somewhat in 400 years. It's a man named Aidan Hart who was asked to illustrate a Bible, and this is his illustration of the letters of Paul. There's some interesting imagery in this, and I want to draw attention to a couple of them. Now you'll notice that he has old and modern buildings. He has both Roman architecture and he has a modern, perhaps a Western and American city in it. I don't want you to miss a real light print across the top, because that's important. That light print across the top says, I saw a light from heaven. And for the person who painted this painting, that was all you needed to know about the letters of Paul. He saw a light from heaven. He'd been on the mountaintop, like Martin Luther King. He had a vision which went beyond this earth. Because on this earth, people give us a false notion of what joy really is and where to find it. Let's think about where Paul is in this prison, dependent upon other people for his care. And we can think about ancient Rome. Think about all those buildings that were built by Caesar. Think about all the taxes from the people in Israel who went to build bathhouses and forums and a Coliseum. And all those people who streamed there to eat good things and to see fights in the Coliseum, to bathe in the bathhouse, to enjoy the perfume from the oil that was brought from Israel. And they're all there by Paul, and they don't enjoy it. They think they do. They think it's found in watching violence, or they think it's found in a bathhouse. But it's not. And so that new painting kind of helps us to consider what the world is like. And this actually is a young man who has created a computer program that will generate a Western city. And so this is all a computer generation. But can you imagine all the smiling faces on all the Photoshop commercials? They all tell you you can have joy. They all tell you where you can find it. And they all tell you how much it costs. This is joy. Somehow it's kind of hollow when you look at Paul. Where do people find joy in that metropolis? Are they really connected? Are they really a community? Are they really sent on a mission from God? What if our sense of joy comes through being dedicated and committed to other people, rather than the things that the world tells us make for joy? Paul believed that. And you can see it in the things that he said. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. And then a little later, in verse 29, he said, he has graciously granted you the privilege not only of believing in Christ, but of suffering for him as well. We need like a piece of chalk on a chalkboard right now. Or a car squealing around a corner. Wait a minute. That's joy? Joy is found in losing yourself? Paul knew the satisfaction of living a life that was in accord with God's will. And how can we, in the kind of society that we live in, really know how to find joy? How can we switch our minds and our lifestyles from being a consumer to being a contributor? And finding joy in contributing to making the world a better place, rather than thinking that we're going to be happy the next time we purchase something. Our modern obsession is popularity, power, pride, and pleasure. It's easy to remember four. I changed some of the names, but I had to get a P on. Think about the price that people pay for that. Think about the terrible price that our celebrities pay for popularity. Do you know any that were happy? Do you know any that really found joy in popularity? There's a dark side to it. Our world runs on power. What kind of a price have you paid for your own pride? When is it that you've not been connected to someone because you were too proud? Look at the terrible price that some people pay for pleasure. What price do we pay for our pride, our pleasure? What price do we pay for our safety? In our jobs, in our marriages, in our career, in our friendships, in our relationships. This is puzzling to the world. This doesn't make sense. It goes against everything that the world tells us finds joy and hope. I think about that scene of Jesus, great scene of Jesus, looking over Jerusalem when he's on his way there. And he has that line, if only you knew the things that make for peace. I can see Paul in his little prison cell looking out over Rome, and I can see him today looking out over the metropolis. If only you knew the things that make for joy. If only you knew the things that make for hope. Because Paul knew those things. But here he is in prison. And he likely is never going to get out. He's destined to die there, as we know. And in God's strange irony, he he is the one person who discovered joy. Because he lived for others and not for himself. Notice how Paul says over and over again in our passage today, for all of you, with all of you. He had this transcendent experience. I saw a light from heaven. And he had a unitive connection to all that was. And that changed his life. So this is a letter of thanks that Paul wrote. A letter of thanks to the people who helped him out. A letter of thanks to God. Now we can often be sarcastic when we thank people. And sometimes I never know if there's an answer, right? Thanks a lot. Is that what Paul is saying in our passage? Thanks a lot, God. Thanks a lot, guys. You brought me, stale bread, water, and Barnabas. Thanks a lot. Paul didn't do that. He said, thanks a lot. A friend of mine recently said, I can handle almost anything as long as I can whine about it. I got a great book from a man that was a member of a congregation in Springfield, Illinois before I came in, Ken Sibley, World War II veteran. And he's got one-page vignettes of events that have happened in his life. And I want to read you a very small one out of Ken Sibley's A Certain Dignity. He's got stories of people that he's met throughout his life. And he said, recently Gene and I were visiting Gene Gray, a long-lost cousin, on his horse farm in suburban St. Louis. I learned some things. Among them, an idea for coping with gossipers. While we visited about many topics, he cited a friend's way of dealing with gossip. Whenever, in a group or singly, a person is running down another person, he simply says, there's a lot of hate in the world. And almost miraculously, effortlessly, and quietly, the gossip ceases. There's a lot of hate in the world. Isn't that an amazing statement? Ken has a dry sense of humor. What if we tried? What if we know that we will remain and continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith? There's an ancient piece of Chinese wisdom. All joy in this world comes from wanting others to be happy. All suffering in this world comes from wanting only oneself to be happy. People are skeptical when I say I want to give you an opportunity for spiritual growth. Because they know the reality behind that. Because it will no doubt lead to challenges. It will no doubt lead to hardships. But it also leads to progress in the faith. You can't steal second base with your foot on first. You can't do it. We have in our world today a focus on ourselves. We're told what joy is. We're told the price of joy. But today I want to introduce you to the 4 things that Paul did today. Paul invited the Philippians to be a part of a community of people who are changing the world. He was connected to people in such a way that they cared for him when he was in prison. He taught people how to live. He taught people the attitude that they should have in mind. And he sent them out to do that will. This is a feedback loop that we hope to do in the life of the church. We invite people, we connect people, we disciple people, and we send them out. When you send people out who are passionate, who are on fire for a mission or engaged, people are invited to be a part of something like that. It's a feedback loop. Here's the last minute. Somebody told me last week I didn't get the minute in a minute. Said it was a little bit over? All right, here we go. My friend Ken simply said there's a lot of hate in the world. And one of our deepest needs is to have a sense of purpose. Paul's red badge of courage was that he had been sent by God to work for a better world and other people. We have to admit we live in a me-first world. We don't hear the truth about the path toward living a really joyful life. Despite his hardships, Paul wrote a letter of joy to his friends, and he invited everyone to share. If you listen closely, and if you pay attention, God will send you on a mission of joy, a mission that's different from the world. Paul was a wonderful model. He defied the way the world treated people. He found ways to bring life and light in even the darkest situations. Paul saw the light from heaven. And he said, to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain.